Hi, and welcome once again to Unpacked and Empowered Plus Finances podcast. I am your host, Marian Nagudo, and I just want to say that I appreciate that you are here listening to this new episode, and I hope that you get something out of it because that's always the goal is to help other people like myself because this is something that I was looking for as well when I was getting started. Today, we're going to be talking about why starting over financially feels so hard. And the hope is this is a newcomer's guide to break the mental barriers or emotional barriers that affect us from this financial reset. And before we proceed, I just want to give out a disclaimer as well that this episode shares personal experiences and general education information about financial mindset. It does not constitute financial advice, so please consult with qualified financial professionals for your personalized guidance specific to your situation. If you're feeling overwhelmed and seem like you don't know where to start, this episode is for you. I want you to feel that you're not alone. All of us who've been to a new country, who've migrated, a lot of us newcomers here in Canada are experiencing most of the concerns that I'm going to mention in this episode. A lot of the challenges that I'm going to discuss today are research based, so you can rest assured that it's not just coming out of my mind, it's definitely coming out of research as well. So I wanted to lighten the mood, even though it can be very emotional to tackle finances, especially when you're on a reset. I want to share with you when we first arrived here in Canada, we barely have $1,000 to our name. But I feel like we were more blessed just because my sisters have been here in Canada for a while. In fact, I was the last one to migrate. And because of that, we have the privilege of not really spending so much in the beginning. We didn't have to pay down payment for rent. And in fact, just to help my sister and my brother in law, they wanted us to just pay once we have our first monthly pay from our salaries. And for that, I'm really grateful. But not everyone gets that kind of privilege. And I know that different people would have different experiences. Some people might have arrived here in Canada where they have brought a lot of savings. So, for example, they've already thought about this for a while, they have a lot of savings, they even are ready to buy a home once they arrived. But for some people, they might have to borrow money. To be an immigrant, actually, you'd have to show proof of funds that you're able to live here for as long as 6 months at least. So, for some people, they might have started by getting debt from families or borrowing money from families just to get started. And for some, like ourselves, we arrived here, we left what we have in the Philippines. We don't have a lot, but I can say that it's a risk that we took. We faced our fears and we came here just like I said earlier, it's only barely $1,000 to our name. We've sold our vehicle when we left. We didn't have a home anyway, so it's not really a big adjustment for us that way. But yeah, some people might have the same experience like us, and I hope that this resonates with you because the goal of this episode is for you to not feel alone, that the struggle is normal, the struggle is real. This overwhelm can cause us to feel stuck. And I want you to know that there are steps that you can take. Even just identifying where you are in your financial journey can help, and knowing where you stand, that could be a good thing to start over. So let's dive in on the challenges that immigrants or newcomers face when we are starting over. So, by newcomers, I will keep referring to immigrants and newcomers, but anyone here, I think even the locals can relate to some of the aspects that we're going to discuss today. But when I say newcomers, it's kind of like myself who've been here for not more than 10 years. So, anyone who has not been in Canada for more than 10 years will be considered newcomers, at least based on this episode. So, the first comprehensive challenge landscape, it discusses primarily challenges that we face, like establishing credit, because for some countries, there are no credit history, or your credit history is not transferable to another country. And then there's also the challenge of finding employment. There could also be language barriers, unrecognized credentials, and access to affordable housing. This is because there's high cost. So sometimes you would be required to get a guarantor just to be able to rent. And there could be upfront payments that, like I said earlier, I'm glad that we didn't have to face. But some newcomers really have that challenge that you'd have to pay like 3 months of rent or 2 months deposit before you get started, or just as a security for your rent. Now, there are also compounding factors such as system level barriers. So, first one would be financial literacy gaps. And this is because we are quite unfamiliar with the Canadian banking system. We're not very much familiar with how investing works here in Canada. And there's also language barriers. So, language barrier hinders us access to reliable financial information and services. Or maybe some we just didn't know what to search on the internet. And there's also this cost of living underestimation, especially in major cities like Toronto or Vancouver. It's definitely gonna be different because it's a high density urban city compared to if you're gonna transfer here or move here to New Brunswick or maybe Nova Scotia or any other rural areas. There's also the mental scarcity or the scarcity mindset, which causes financial strain, and that could affect our decision making capacity as well. Some of us may face discrimination in job markets and sometimes even housing sectors. We could be discriminated to live in a certain place because of how we look. But the good thing is, diversity and inclusion is being promoted very well now. So I'm glad that's happening. And some could be facing credential recognition issues when it comes to education, because might have finished a doctorate degree or you might have finished a master's degree in the country that you're from, but when it's transferred here in Canada, it could be a lesser degree, or it could be you might have to start over. When it comes to studies, you might have to enroll again in an MBA so that you can get the job that you want. But that's not always the case. So it's not necessarily the same for everybody. There's also a research conducted by Ferrer back in 2020 that language barriers can also lead to us having financial misinformation, and it may cause us to rely on fringe financial services. One study from McGill University, research by a student, says that there are three key factors affecting newcomer financial well being. So, the first one is lack of trust in financial institutions. To some immigrants, they might have that already instilled in their mind in their previous country that they don't really trust banks or any other financial institutions. So, when they come here, they bring that same mindset. And there's also misinformation through social media and social networks. Seeking financial knowledge, like on Facebook, or maybe an influencer that is not really well versed when it comes to real financial education. So some would just be finfluencers without the backing knowledge. The way that they're sharing information is just because they have an experience for themselves, but it's not something that they have a background for. So that's one thing as well. And then there's lack of accessible, effective, and personalized financial literacy tools. There could also be that we're very hesitant sometimes to reach out to financial professionals because we think that, oh, I'm going to pay a lot of money to get financial advice from this person. Now, other than the research that I've already discussed earlier, there are also four psychological barriers that make starting over feel impossible. And this could be one, let me know in the comments as well if you are affected by this, and that's called the comparison trap. This is when you are measuring your chapter 1 to another's chapter 10. So when we arrived here in Canada, I started working at a fast food restaurant, and my husband was working in the same restaurant as I am. And we have customers from all walks of life come in. Sometimes it makes me wonder, like when I look at them, it makes me think, will I ever work in a corporate setting again? Or is that even what I really want? Or will I ever be able to work from home again? Similar to the experience that I had in the Philippines. Sometimes it could be the same for us. We might be comparing because we're just getting started, but we look at other people and it makes us think, I wish we could be that way right away. We want to do it as fast as we can. And sometimes that just builds so much overwhelm in our minds. And I wish we could avoid that actually. The comparison trap can also come from frequent social media use. So sometimes you would see other people, they're going to this place, and of course, you want to travel as well, which there's nothing wrong with traveling as long as you're not putting yourself into debt while you're doing so. Or if you do, which we've been there as well in the beginning, we would put our travel into credit card, but as long as you're responsible and you're gonna pay that right after, or when you're gonna pay that once it's due, then there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, sometimes we would like to do it right away. We would like to experience things right away, and that can give us a setback and can hinder us from saving for what's our main priority. Sometimes, even in our families, even in our friends, we don't need to look beyond, but we could look at their houses, the places, the things. We would even look at the vehicles that they drive, and we would be like, how come it's very difficult for me? And it can cause you to just keep comparing, and then that traps you. So here's the truth: when we catch ourselves comparing our chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10, we need to remember that they too had to start somewhere. So, unless you're someone who inherited money, everyone has to start from saving from zero. And that's exactly what we did. We turned our questions into prayers and got motivated to save towards a down payment for a vehicle. My husband even had to work 2 jobs so we can set aside money as soon as possible for that down payment. And that's just because here in New Brunswick, it's more cost efficient for a family to have a vehicle to travel from one point to another compared to when you're in a big city. It's easier to do it by public transport. So it depends where you're at. But for us, in the beginning, what we saved for is the vehicle as soon as we can. We were able to purchase our vehicle for after 6 months that we stayed here. I just want you to have a reality check that everyone's financial timeline is going to be different and your journey is uniquely yours. I definitely would advise that you don't compare someone else's middle or end because it'll just steal your motivation and cloud your judgment, and it's not going to help at all with your financial reset. Now, the second barrier I would say is the knowledge gap overwhelm, and that's when there's too much information and it becomes analysis paralysis. The Canadian financial system operates differently, and it can flood us with too much information. Sometimes we don't know where to start. Should we save? Should we just pay our debts that somehow we've already accumulated? Or should we invest? Do I get insurance? Which type of insurance do I get for my vehicle? Which type of insurance do I get for my home? Or which type of insurance should I get for myself? And because there's so many options, it can sometimes cause us not to have a clear starting point. And again, that's the analysis paralysis. So I remember the first time that we went to this car dealership, I think it was just about 3 months in. We got a harsh reality check because we thought that having saved the money was enough. But in fact, we needed to build more credit because we'd only been in Canada for about 3 months. And because of that, we didn't have the financial stability that securing a loan required. So we had to wait 6 months in that we're able to get a vehicle, and that's not without a down payment. We had to pay something in advance so that we're able to get the vehicle that we want. But also the good thing is because we only had $500 limits to our credit cards. We hadn't acquired any real debts. So again, going back to building a credit, you can start off with just a secured credit card. It just means that you'd have to deposit the amount of money and you can use that as your credit. And then eventually, when you've built enough history, the bank is going to give you back that money and it's yours. So, because I was paranoid as well about building debts, and so what I would do is as soon as we spend the money, as soon as we spend groceries using our credit card, I would pay it right away because I don't want them to build up. Because of some research that I did, I made sure that we only use up to 30% of our limit. And some information that can cause us to overwhelm as well because there's language barriers. The financial terminologies that might have been used from our home countries wouldn't be the same as what is here. And then there's also the employment challenges that could be overwhelming when you're trying to get the job, when you're trying to get accredited for your education. You could also get overwhelmed in doing research on what type of home should you get or how much should you save for a down payment for a home, like what are the costs involved, so many different things to consider. And even credit and money management challenges, even our proximity to traditional banks. Yeah, there is a lot of information at our disposal. Because we're new, there could be a lot of information that we're going to research in the beginning, and we could put ourselves in a rabbit hole looking for what solution to do. So take it one step at a time is really what I would say. And I guess based on my experience, what I did right is I didn't bury myself with too much information about building credit. And like I said, I just kept it simple. As soon as I spend money, just made sure that it's paid. I made sure that all the bills are paid on time, and I think that was good. And when we finally got our car, we started saving for a down payment because our goal initially was to be able to get our own home. So we want our own vehicle, our own home, our own everything. And that's very common among us. Even the locals think that way as well. Now, when I started working for one of Canada's biggest financial institutions, even though I wasn't working in the banking side, my eyes were open to the Canadian financial landscape. Because I worked at that institution, I have access to, okay, so these are the products, these are the things that the bank offers. That was a very good experience for me. My suggestion when you are overwhelmed, just start with one thing, start with one financial goal. Maybe just starting with $1,000 of savings would help, just because you've already used up all the money that you brought here. And just once you're able to achieve that $1,000 savings, maybe it's gonna give you a motivation. Oh, hey, I'm able to save again. So that's a good start. And then you go further. You go further from any other financial goals that you wanna achieve. Now, the third one is what we would call the scarcity mindset. It's when fear of making mistakes keeps you stuck. Coming from financial instability or starting with limited resources can create this scarcity mindset. And this is the belief that resources like money, opportunities, and time are limited and running out. And because of that, it creates fear and anxiety around every financial decision that we're going to make. So instead of focusing on what we could gain, we make choices based on what we might lose. So when you're starting with limited resources, this mindset can feel completely natural because every financial decision feels like it could make or break your future. I remember I used to lie awake at night calculating and recalculating our budget. This was when we were trying to save for our home. Because I have two jobs, we have the ability to save more. Sometimes I would think, should this extra 400 go towards the house fund or should this go to our emergency fund? So this I cannot afford to make mistakes mentality can be paralyzing. But scarcity mindset creates this weird contradiction. When you're aware that you have a restriction, it's like your brain wants to rebel. So I'd work two jobs, then I would justify my spending sprees because I would tell myself that I deserve this. I would say to myself, I only shop sales anyway, I only shop secondhand usually. So it's like, this feeling when you're trying to lose weight and you're trying to restrict what you're eating, but the more you restrict yourself, the more you want to eat more. It's the same with finances as well. It's like our mind fights against the very limits that are meant to build our security. But you know what's the real irony? It's when you're so afraid of making the wrong move that you make no move at all, which is it's actually the worst decision. And I see this constantly. People know that they need emergency funds or retirement savings, but they're paralyzed by fear of choosing imperfectly. And here's what I learned: the cost of waiting is always higher than the cost of starting imperfectly. The scarcity mindset whispers, what if you're making a mistake? But shifting to a different mindset, a more positive mindset, asks, what opportunities am I missing by not taking action? What is the change that you need so that you can transform your family's financial future? So, my recommendation would be to have a mindset shift because there's progress over perfection. And the best financial plan is one that you can actually implement even if it's not perfect. Now, the fourth barrier is the cultural and system shock. And this is when everything you know about money no longer applies. There's this whole other layer that people don't talk about enough, and that's the complete shock of trying to navigate Canadian finances when everything works differently than back home. When you're dealing with different banking systems, building credit from scratch, and you also have no financial history in Canada, which literally means that you're starting at zero. I remember walking into the bank for the first time with my sister. We were offered a no fee account, but it's only no fee for the first 6 months. So I was kind of like, it's new to me because back home in the Philippines, we didn't pay banking fees as long as we stayed with the same bank. But here, you'd have to add it to your budget. And there are other options though. After when I did my research, when I did some more looking, I realized that there are no fee banking. Even when I was working for that big Canadian banking institution, I am hearing bank accounts from clients that are new to me, like Simply Financial, Equitable. They would give Tangerine, Neo. Those are not usually the brick and mortar banks that you would see, but there are options that are free online that doesn't have to be part of your budget. So yeah, I'm glad I did my research, and I wish I had learned earlier as well about the tax efficient strategies that Canada offers. Like there's TFSAs, RRSPs, and FHSA now. We didn't have that when we were saving for our home. Now, fortunately, at my previous job, I was able to take advantage of the group RRSP, even though I didn't really understand it at the time. So sometimes acting first and learning later works out as long as you catch your mistake right away. But in my case, it's not really a mistake because saving in the group RRSP is the company is contributing to my savings as well, and that's free money that I would not get by myself. So that was a good step. The same thing happened with my children's RESP. As soon as I heard about it, we just started contributing, and I never regretted setting aside that money because she was able to use it when she went to her first year. Now, speaking from my personal experience, we also made the decision to purchase life insurance and critical illness insurance back in 2020. And that's only because I am aware of what the benefits are. I used to be an insurance advisor back in the Philippines, and I understand the need for that, at least based on my family's experience. The only thing I wish is I wish we had stayed more consistent when it comes to our savings habits, because when we started, we are really serious about saving because we have that goal, we have that why, that we have to have our own vehicle so it's easier for us to travel, we have to have our own home so we can be comfortable, we have to have our own everything. I think that's part of the comparison trap as well. I wish we'd really had stayed more consistent, but that's not to say that if you've stopped saving but now you know that you need to get back to it, just start over. It's okay, because the struggle is real, and sometimes we would get emergencies. We would also contribute to other people's emergency, like from back home in the Philippines. Like if somebody needs money, sometimes if you have extra, you have to send some help. Sometimes you don't even have extra, you'd still have to send some help. And that's how we love our family. And that's the beauty of really understanding that you have to save for emergencies, not just for yourself, but the people you love as well. Some people might disagree, but the credit score building, even though it was very challenging, I find that I actually appreciate it, because to me it felt more like a motivation, because it means to me that anyone can access services just by building good credit. And somehow it made the gap between the financially challenged and the wealthy feel smaller than compared to back home. Now, in my current role in the financial services industry, I'm learning so much about how different government benefits can integrate with personal savings and protection strategies. And I just want to continue to share general insights and educational content so that newcomers like me can understand the building blocks of solid financial foundation right from the start. So the adaptation strategy really is to embrace the learning curve. Every system difference is an opportunity to build knowledge that serves your new life here in Canada. So here's the truth that I want you to remember. The struggles of being a newcomer or starting over financially are absolutely real. But please don't fall into the comparison trap, because not everyone will have the same timeline, and that's completely okay. Not everyone will have the same journey. So your journey is yours. Celebrate your small wins and encourage others in doing the same as well. Because who will help each other? The people around us, right? So here are some clear steps that you can take today. First thing would be identify which of the psychological blocks or which of the barriers that I've discussed is resonating the most to you in your current situation. Is it the comparison trap? Is it the knowledge gap overwhelm, the scarcity mindset, or cultural or system shock, or even the barriers that was discussed based on research in the beginning? So name that barrier, because just naming it gives you power over it. And trust and pray that God will put you out of that. That God will give you the strategy to move away from that. Because knowing exactly where you stand on your financial journey right now, it's the perfect starting point. So just be mindful of the information that you're getting. Even what I'm saying here on this podcast, you have to do your own research as well. You can't just rely on one person saying, "Oh, I've had great success investing in this type of investment, so just go ahead and jump in." It could be the same for you. So, yes, you can jump in, but as long as you do your own research, as long as you do your research from really credible financial sources. One of the resources that would be good to look at is canada.ca. We actually have the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, and financial institutions that are linked to the government are very reliable and very credible. And just for your information, insurance is heavily regulated here in Canada as well. So, if you want to dive deeper into building a solid financial foundation, I encourage you to listen to my podcast episode, Mid Year Reset: Building a Financial Plan on Faith, Not Fear, where I discuss how to move from fear based decisions to faith based financial planning, and also the episode on pyramid of financial priorities. And this is so you can have a guide on where to start when there's too much information to tackle. Let me know in the comments as well if you are already aware of the pyramid of financial priorities and where you stand. Now, please note again, the personal experiences that I've shared and general information shared in this episode are for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. For your personalized guidance, you would be recommended to consult with a qualified financial professional. Now, if you're ready to do a complete financial reset and you'd want to explore how professional guidance might fit into your situation, feel free to reach out to me directly and you'll learn more about the services that I offer. And before you go, I would appreciate if this resonated with you at all, if you would like subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what's been your biggest financial challenge when you're starting over. Because your story might be exactly what another newcomer needs to hear today. And remember, you're not behind, you're not broken, and your fresh start is actually your greatest advantage. Thank you.